Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Bismillah, Bismillah.
Testing,
Hello.
1, 2, 3. Hello. ABC.
Testing. Yeah,
Mine's not
fine.
working. Testing. 1, 2, 3. It is moving.
I do see the waves.
I see the waves as well. Yeah.
There was just now over the weekend. We'll do an update. They got interrupted by a fire alarm right when the question and answer started. So everybody thinks I arranged for that. Yeah.
This is where the fire comes in.
Is it?
Yeah,
Really?
This is very high tech stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah,
If you get close enough, you can feel the heat.
What?
Oh,
there
yes.
we go. Now we're on.
Nice.
Now we're on. You gotta dim the lights or something.
Our last speaker was sweating, so. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to Medina Labs. Oh, this is a makeshift fire chat. We had some really talented guys in town, so we wanted to just get Medina Labs, their story, what they have done so far. So we have from the UK, well, coming from the southpaw corner, that's how you wanted me to introduce him, as Mike Tyson. So brother Ibrahim, and his co-founder, brother Mohsen. What they've done is they have raised over $200 million portfolio. They work with a $200 million portfolio, which is absurd, mashallah, alhamdulillah. And they are a pure A capital, so they work with private equity, real estate, and they are the Islamic finance group. So I don't want to take too much of my time. You see me every week, but it's cool that they will tell you about their story, how they started, what they've done. They're based in the UK, so you'll see that British accent. We'll slam him after the chat, but amazing, brother, mashallah. So I won't take too long. We'll have Q&A. We'll have it afterwards, inshallah. But we do want to hear your story and how you've got into such a beautiful spot, mashallah.
Amazing, man. Jazakallah khair, everyone. It is slightly disconcerting because I can see the video and it's like, oh my God, I'm like, there's a fire right next to my head. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed being in Detroit, which was a really nice change from where we first arrived, which was Miami. And Miami is lovely from a weather perspective, but Miami is extremely busy. And when I came to Detroit, I was trying to figure out why is it so quiet?
Where is everyone?
And where is everyone exactly? And then Chris from Launch Good, he explained that apparently this is a city that was built for 2.5 million people, and now there's it's shrunk. I was like, this is perfect for me as a British driver that's used to sensible people on the road. This is perfect. So I've got at least 100 yards between me and everyone else. But no, I've really enjoyed it. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of our journey, and then we want to we want to make sure that we spend enough time going into the weeds of stuff that can be useful, right? Operational stuff rather than just the highlight reel, and then we'll open up for Q&A as well. So just to give you a little bit of the background, me and Mohsen met in the year of our Lord 2012. So this was at an 2011. So the equivalent of MSA over there is called ISOC, so the Islamic Society Barbecue. And I was doing PPE, Philosophy, Politics and Economics at Oxford, and Mohsen is probably the only South Asian Muslim child who's been allowed by his family to do French and Russian What a degree that is. And neither of those things are particularly helpful these days. So me and Mohsin met, and Mohsin obviously had a lot of time on his hand because he was just reading these French. Sartre, and what were you reading?
All sorts.
Yeah, you're reading all sorts,
Yeah.
or not reading it.
Yeah.
From what I remember.
Spark Notes.
And so after university, we went into doing. So we were thinking as young people, we wanted to do something to do with finance because that's where everyone is headed, and that's where there seems to be money. And we're Muslims, so we want to do something to do with Islam and helping the community. So why not put the two things together? And I think a lot of if you kind of take away nothing from this, I think it's just generally be directionally kind of mission oriented and keep moving in a direction, and things will kind of open up. So after university, we thought, all right, let's do a master's in Islamic finance. Muslim did his Islamic finance qualifications. I started my alamiya with Sheikh Akram Nadwi in the Islamic studies, and we both ended up in corporate law because we figured that if it doesn't work out, and at least there's a few exit options with corporate law. And so I trained at Ashurst and then a US firm called Devervoies in Plimpton. Mohsin trained at Squire Patton Boggs, and we continued on our merry way. And at this point in time, we started the blog called Islamic Finance Guru. And how this came about was we were, researching for ourselves, and we would go online and research things. And this was before Claude and ChatGPT, where you actually had to like look at books and you had to use your mind. Remember those days when you had to actually think. And we found things online, and they were all either in Arabic or Malaysian, and very simple. Like this is haram, this is halal. Sometimes the same thing. This is haram and this is halal. So it was quite confusing. So we thought, let's try and explain it for ourselves. And if it's helpful for us, then maybe it's helpful for others. And so that's kind of Islamic Finance Guru. And that's continued. And we went full time on it in 2019. And to give you a sense of the journey, today, when we started, we were reaching maybe 200, 300 people every month, and that continued for probably about 3 years. And today, we reach about 3 to 4 million people every month. So the whole thing accelerated over a long period of time. And I'll talk a little. I'll hand over to you, Mohsin, to talk a little bit about when we went full time. But essentially, in 2019, in January, I remember January 2019, we hands up who is thinking about doing a startup or their own thing at the moment. Let's see a show of hands. And if I could see a show of hands, who's already doing something of their own? Okay, cool. So the majority of people are thinking about it. So in January 2019, we were full-time corporate lawyers, oiling the wheels of capitalism with the blood of the workers, as I like to put it. And we thought, all right, you know what we're going to do? We are going to go full-time in 24 months. December 2020, we're going to go full-time, Mohsin. And we started just having lots and lots of meetings. And I remember there was a coffee shop which is now shut down. And as lawyers, you work really late, but you actually start quite late as well. And so you have this kind of time between 8 a.m. to about 10 a.m. where you can do lots of meetings. So I was doing about 3 or 4 of these coffee meetings every single morning, and Mohsin was the same. And if you do that enough times, it's weird, but your network starts to grow and everything starts to somehow start to work. And within 9 months, we'd got to the point where we had enough money coming in that we thought, okay, we need to actually quit this career and go full time on IFG. And it was it's a big risk even at the time. It was a big pay cut, but we felt like we'd got to that critical mass to do that. And then I quit. Mohsin quit before me, and I quit. And 3 weeks later, we had COVID hit. And so this was the start of our entrepreneurial journey. Mr. Patel, maybe I come over to you.
Yes. So here we are. So I remember. So it's early 2020 when we both quit, and I was a couple of months earlier. So I remember it was a November morning, and I still had some annual leave to take and so on. So I actually ended up taking like a half day. So I remember walking out of my law firm office for the last time with little other than that rucksack, actually, and my laptop, and thinking, oh my God, like now we need to kind of do this, right? Like we took the step of quitting, but now we were just, two guys with a laptop, and he was actually still working full time. So I headed to the nearest coffee shop and started working. And to give you a sense of what we had then, it was, although we did have an audience and some traction and so on, it wasn't really much in the grand scheme of things. Um, so it was just a blog at the time, and content creation back. I mean, we started the blog in 2015, and content creation even in 2019, 2020 time was not really what it is now. Like now, it's a thing, right? People become content creators, but back then it wasn't really a thing. And so we had this blog. We knew there was an audience. We knew there was kind of something, but we definitely didn't have the final answer. Right? There was a hell of a lot to still figure out. And I think that we kind of took the bet, I guess, that in order to figure this out, we need to get out of the day to day of corporate law, because it's a very demanding job. And for further context, we kind of recently got married and started having children and all that kind of thing as well. So, and to be honest with you, I think that pressure was probably quite helpful. Sometimes, there's a saying, right, about burning the boats, where you go somewhere and you kind of got to not give yourself a plan B. And sure, there's like a reckless element to that, but then there's also a good side to that as well, because it kind of forces you. And I do think that we as humans and our brains work in kind of weird ways sometimes. And if we take away the plan B, it makes the plan A actually possible. Whereas if you've got the plan B, sometimes the plan A might not even work out, and you just kind of you end up magnetized to the plan B. It's a weird kind of phenomenon. And so we kind of set about work. And initially, we had done some courses. We had started an Islamic wills product. But the thing that our users kept telling us was, can we just give you our money? Which is a kind of weird place to be as a founder, because of course you want to say yes, but then rightly, we have these wonderful regulations and laws and so on that are designed to protect people, and at that time we weren't regulated. So our best answer to that was, no, we can't, but we can kind of point you to these other places. And we were writing reviews of other things and so on. And for the longest time, we kept pushing that, and we really did actually believe that our business model was going to be as a marketplace of other kind of investment providers. And what we kind of realized over time was that because we couldn't control their delivery, it was quite hard. I mean, some businesses are perfectly good marketplaces. I just don't think that we felt that comfortable telling our users to go somewhere where we couldn't then control it, because the Sharia compliant kind of investing space ultimately is still pretty new relative to where mainstream investments are. And so we kind of took the decision that actually we should just do the hard thing and get regulated and do all of this stuff ourselves. And so from there started a journey of probably about 1.5 to 2 years of actually just getting regulated with a financial regulator in the UK, who are notoriously quite slow and methodical and so on. But then eventually we did get that regulation, and from there, that's when we started actually offering investments for the first time to our users. And now for the first time, we could actually say yes when people said, "Can we just give you our money?" Yeah, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so I think this, if I just listening back to you, Mohsin, it was bringing back some good memories and a lot of bad memories as well. Because if you kind of think about it, there are traditional businesses where you have a very set way of making money. So you've got Yemeni coffee shops, right? Very set way of making money. You buy the coffee beans. Sometimes I'm hearing from Costco, apparently you can get, not from Costco, exactly. And that was one of the complaints was of one of the coffee shop owners. And then you sell it for a markup, right? And it's a well-known business model. But with venture or with businesses that are basically trying to create a new kind of category, you don't have a business model. And so you're, as Reid Hoffman puts it, you're jumping off a cliff and trying to assemble the paraglider on the way down before you hit the ground. And this is literally what we were doing. As Mohsin said, we had a wills business, we had a courses business, we had affiliate marketing. You forgot that. We had the halal stock screener before Amal Invest and Zoya, because we figured out that it probably wasn't going to scale. So we're the masters of going from £0 to 100,000 pounds or dollars, and getting stuck there. Like, we are the masters at that. We can do that all day long. And so because of that, but the problem is that if you do that, you're not actually a great business. And so we had to end up, as Mohsin was saying, cutting pretty much everything from that and parking that and really doubling down on the one thing that worked. And I remember that the light bulb moment, which was, what should you double down on? Because there's so much that you can do. And initially just kind of going out there and trying to, like, helter skelter, let's just like try and make money and do something, right? Which is actually the right attitude. The fact that we were moving, shipping stuff, getting revenue in, talking to customers, in retrospect, that was really useful. The thing that led us to double down on one thing rather than anything else, and probably we took maybe 6 to 12 months in too much time before we doubled down, was there was a Iranian, I mean, in these days, talking to Iranians is a bit of a sore subject, but there was an Iranian founder, and he had exited, and he sat down with us and he said, look, you need to look at your PMF score, your product market fit score. And this was news to us. We didn't know anything about this. And we said, yeah, we've got product market fit. Our customers love us. This is like not a problem. He said, no, you should actually ask your customers. We're like, no, it's fine. We've got product market fit. But then he really pushed us, and so we did it. And we actually asked our customers, and you can look this up for the entrepreneurs amongst you, what the product market fit score is. But the key thing is that you ask your customers, how disappointed would you be if we didn't exist? And the point is that you want to have at least 40% of people saying that we would be very disappointed. That would mean that they would miss you being there. And we asked our courses guys, and they weren't that disappointed if we didn't exist. We asked our wills guys. We thought, all right, these guys would be they were not really disappointed that we wouldn't exist. And there was this investment, angel investing business called IFG.VC at the time that we'd kind of ignored and overlooked and tried to like kick it into death, but it just wouldn't die. And those were the guys who came back very clearly, and they said, we would be very disappointed if you didn't exist. And we were like, oh, okay, well, that's told us something, hasn't it? And so then we went in and we kind of really doubled down on that. And I'm going to segue very quickly to talking a little bit about fundraising, because I know that was one of the things that people wanted us to cover. And then I'll come to you, Mohsin, for talking a little bit about, I guess, scale once we've got to product market fit. So on the fundraising side, there are two types of fundraising that we've done. One is fundraising for the business itself. And over the years, in total now, we probably raised about 7.5-ish million. And for the platform itself, which is our day job, right, raising assets, raising money for deployment, we've raised about 225 million. And we raise somewhere in the region of about, I'd say, $7 to $9 million on a monthly basis these days. And that kind of just, grows. And the question, I guess, is what is helpful when thinking about fundraising in both contexts. On the first side, where you're fundraising for the business itself, the answer to that changes depending on which stage of the journey that you're at. In many ways, the pre-seed and seed stage is probably the easiest bit of the journey to fundraise for, because all you need there really is a fantastic story, and you need to show that you're already up and doing something. The fil haraka baraka kind of attitude. Just do stuff and show that you've got some kind of traction, some kind of wait list, you've done some kind of revenue, you're starting to show that there is something here. And it would even then it can be extremely hard if you don't get your story right. And I remember the first time we fundraised, it took us a long time and it was extremely difficult. The thing that really helped us was probably twofold. The first, um, welcome. Um, the first was that we had really helpful friends who introduced us to other VC funds and other sources of capital. So when you're about to fundraise, if you're doing it on your own, then don't do that. That's not how any other top founder does it. Even the top founders, even the exited founders, they don't do that. There are multiple founders that have gone on and done some spectacular businesses, far more successful than us, but they come to us at times to introduce them to some of our contacts and vice versa. And that's just because that's how you're supposed to do it, right? Because they won't necessarily know everyone, we won't necessarily know everyone. So make sure that you have 2 or 3 Sherpas that will help guide you. And Medina Labs is probably a fantastic place to come and talk to, because this is a melting pot where, within this room, there's probably about 30 different connections that can help you in the fundraising journey. And the second thing I'd say is have a, a game plan, Gantt chart thing, right? Have a project plan where, rather than just going one after another to different angels ad hoc or different VC funds ad hoc, do it in a very systematic way where 2-3 weeks before you start fundraising, all your materials are in order and you start doing this kind of pre-reach out and saying, look, we're thinking about investing, let's have some coffees and what have you, and start warming people up. And the goal of this bit is potentially to get someone to preempt you, where they will say, well, actually, you know what, we want to invest, here's a term sheet. And if that happens, that's bingo, and you've really accelerated things. But if that doesn't happen, that's perfectly fine. What you do is, in week 1, you're lining up a set of funds, maybe the tier 3 funds, the ones that you don't really necessarily want, but you're going after those guys first. And you're setting up the meetings for the next round of funds and the next round of funds. So within that first 5 to 10 days, you've got through the phase 1 of all of the funds that you ultimately want to go for, and you're probably looking at about 30 to 45 funds. So it's pretty intense stuff, but you want to do it really tightly, closely together, and it's a big scheduling thing, right? And VCs, they have packed diaries, so that's why you need to start and prepare a few weeks beforehand to make sure that you're diarizing people up roughly around the same time. And the whole point of this is because you're trying to create a marketplace for your shares. That's ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the best price for the shares that you have. It's like the coffee beans. It's like the Yemeni coffee, right? You're trying to sell the coffee for the most value that you can. And the way that you do that is you try and create FOMO, fear of missing out, and you try and create competition. And you can only do that dynamic if it's closely together. Otherwise, it just kind of fizzles out. Because if you're talking to one person after another, they fizzle out. They never really, have any competition with the next person who might also fizzle out. But if you have both of them in parallel, then you actually have something to play against, right? And then you after that, you go through the second round and probably a third round, and you look to try and get a term sheet. Term sheets, when they come along, they will normally be timed. So there'll be like a 5-day timeline on these term sheets, because now this is a key phase for the VC, because they know what you're going to do naturally is go to all of the other VC funds and say, guys, we now have a term sheet. It's not good practice to tell them who the VC is. That's not necessarily cool, but it's good to tell, let them know that you have a term sheet. And then hopefully you get a competitive dynamic, and then ultimately you end up fundraising. There's lots more stuff that we can talk about in this area, but hopefully that kind of gives you the highlights of that. In terms of fundraising for the platform, that is a completely different story. That is actually really like any other business, in that, for a business that sells widgets or sells consultancy services, the reason why people buy those widgets or those consultancy services is because of reputation, is because of brand, is because of the quality, is because of track record. It's because the people are accessible, all of the usual kind of things that make a successful business. Our business just happens to be raising money from investors and then looking to deploy that. So that is actually, I can talk a little bit about the insights there as well, perhaps in the Q&A. And there are some specifics, but broadly speaking, that's how I would describe it. Mr. Patel.
So on going from fundraising, I guess, to the kind of post product market fit world where you've got a product, it clearly works, people want to buy it, people are upset if you don't exist, as the PMF score kind of tells you. And now you're thinking about scale, because you've kind of done the hard bit, you've done the 0 to 1 bit, and now you're thinking about, okay, how do I go from 1 to 10? And there you're going to have a whole host of problems, because sometimes you think that the 0 to 1 bit is the hard bit, and in many ways it is. But I think it's like, for those of you who have children, when they're young, it all feels like very difficult, and you think, when are they going to grow up? And then they grow up, and now they're like 9 years old, 10 years old, 11, 12, and it feels like, oh my god, these decisions are even more consequential now. And before, at least I could just make them quiet and put them to sleep, but now it's kind of like I'm worried that they're out and it's 1 a.m. and what's going on, and they're not. Different stresses. And I think it's the same with a company, right? Like early doors, you have problems, you're worrying about, is this going to work, is it not going to work, and so on. But then when it actually starts working, there's a whole host, there's like lots more doors of problems that open up. And there's too much to kind of cover, I think, in this area, because customer support, like, there's too many areas to cover. But I think one thing that I guess that I've learned is that companies are like human beings, in the sense that they are a unique thing that can only like, one company cannot be the same as another company. Even if I try to copy exactly what somebody else does, and as we know, people are trying with the Yemeni coffee, right? There's seems to be a theme, but there can never be an exact replica of another company. The same way that there can never be an exact replica of a human being. We all have our own kind of traits and mannerisms and values and so on. And I think at the post product market fit stage, it's really important that you, as the owner, anchor yourself to a kind of a value set that the company is always going to gravitate around. Because as owners, we listen to lots of things and we get lots of advice and so on and so forth. And sometimes it can be easy to get lost in that, because these are very successful people, and oh, if this person's saying it, then it must be true. But then I think we also forget that you know we are the ones that have created this particular baby, our company, and it exists in the way that it exists because of the way that we've created it and the people that are now in this company with it. And so you have to have a really strong gut, and a really strong mission kind of statement, right? That that every decision that we take in this company gears around this mission set. And I think one big learning for us has been that whenever we've been in those difficult moments, you know someone in the room will surface the question of what's right for the mission. Putting all this like other stuff aside and the commercial bit and whatever, which is important. We are ultimately a for-profit company, but if you have a mission that permeates through the company, because now the company is more than just the two of us, right? Then you trust that people are going to be making the right calls when it comes to those hard decisions. And so, I guess I'm talking really to culture, because if you are weak on culture, i.e., it's not clear to, I mean, in the early days, sure, it might be clear that the second employee, the third employee, maybe they get it. But are you creating a world where the 10th employee gets it and the 20th employee gets it? And we're going through this now. Like, will the 50th employee get it as tightly as the fifth employee did? And if not, then how do you make sure that that happens? And it's hard as an owner because you've got a million and one things to be doing. But I do think that a weak culture in the end like will come back to bite you. And it's hard because in the early days you're very focused on sales, and rightly so, but there always has to be a kind of a balancing act where as owners we need to be making sure that the company has got your DNA running through it, because as I said, it's a unique thing. And so all of this stuff at the post PMF stage, like the scale and the employees and how you do basically any bit of it, you can kind of tie it all, I think, back down to that this is it's a unique being, and you need to make sure that you're true to that. I don't know if you'd add anything to that.
I think just one final thing I would add to that is, and I heard it articulated, I don't know by whom actually, and they said that at the start, a startup is like a person who's walking, and I know that's quite hard in America because there's no sidewalks a lot of the time, but you start walking and you can go anywhere, right? You don't have any particular obstructions. Um, then you start getting to some sort of product market fit, some sort of scale, and you get yourself a bicycle. And a bicycle can go most places, but it can't go everywhere like a human being can. And then eventually you upgrade from a bicycle into a car. Now you can get even faster to places, but there's even fewer places that you can go. And then eventually, now that you really know where you're going, you get yourself a bullet train. And now you're going there really, really fast, but there's very little that you can do. If you want to, if you want to twist and adjust, you can't do that anymore. And uh, and it's a painful process for someone who has the freedom of walking to give up some of that freedom and go to the bicycle and then the car and the train. But you have to do that. And at each stage, there's a level and a layer of sophistication that happens. The bicycle people are not the same people as the car people, and not the same people as the train people. And that means that you might need to lose some of the team. And it also means that you might need to add a lot more infrastructure and operations and systems and processes, things that frankly I don't particularly like, as Mohsin gets annoyed with me about. But you need that because otherwise the thing isn't really going to scale. That's pretty much everything that we wanted to cover in the initial part. Over to you guys for any questions that you might have or any observations.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, mashallah. It's inspiring, alhamdulillah. You've now had some time, you've had a portfolio, you've seen many different companies, right? You had initial thoughts about those companies, of course. We would like to think that inshallah all of them succeed, but some may have succeeded more than others. What are the general traits that you've seen about successful ventures, right? And maybe give some examples of your most successful, in your portfolio of successful ventures.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have some interesting thoughts on it, Mohsin, as well.
This is on the venture side specifically, you mean?
Yeah, the venture side.
Yeah, because venture and private credit, private equity, they're kind of, what looks successful is different in each of those. I'd say on venture, having the humility to know that the majority of the time you're going to be wrong, and that means that you don't over-index towards saying I really like this guy or girl, so we should go heavy on this. Actually, we should be much more about it and think about the portfolio as a whole, right? If we worked out that we want to have 25 companies in this portfolio, 300 to 400k checks each time, that's what we do. We don't care if they look really good or look really bad. We just do it. So that's one thing. The second thing I'd say, in terms of if I reflect on the companies that have done really well, it's founders so second-time founders. There's a kind of benefit to that, significant benefit to that. The other thing I'd say is founders who put their own money in it. Very, very, very rare these days, but that's an interesting and good signal. The other thing I'd say is founders who approach the business not like a tech business where you're kind of trying to FOMO people and it's kind of like vibes and we're just like on the next fundraising cycle and we're trying to just kind of increase the valuations. They're not playing that game. Ultimately, they are traditional business people. They're focused on actually making hard money in revenue and cash coming in and trying to turn profitable. They may not be able to turn profitable because of the nature of the business that they're in, but that mindset is really powerful. Like if I think about a company like GoCab, which is a company that does car kind of financing, and it plugs into Uber and a number of other competitors to Uber around Africa and the Middle East. And when we invested, they were just a few million in revenue, and they're now, in the tens of millions in revenue within 12 to 18 months. It's been spectacular. And the founders there, we've seen multiple founders from Uzbekistan, interestingly enough, where they just have that, down to earth kind of grit. We need to work hard. You call Azmat up and it's 5 a.m. in the morning. I mean, I don't call Azmat at 5 a.m. in the morning, but if I message him, like the response time is really fast, and he's always out and about. He's always flying around, and he's got that hustle about him. So that I think is a really good signal. And then I'd say probably the final thing is founders who have that knack of being able to believe something really, really firmly, but also loosely held. It's a very strong belief, loosely held, where they will pivot. And we've had another company that went from 1 million to 9 million this year, and the start of the year they were selling carbon credits. At the end of the year, that I don't know what they're doing. This like
AI. It's more for AI data center type things now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, hang on, what you did? What? But it's because they've had to pivot, and their positioning has to change, and at the same time, they made the money increase, significantly throughout that period. So that kind of like, they're like like those lizards, very hard to kill, and quite adaptable is another trait.
I think my observation, kind of echoing what Ibrahim said, but a couple of additional things. One is that it's hard to put, especially in venture. I just don't think there is a pattern, and I think anyone that says there is, in my opinion, not being truthful. The other thing I think is that I think particularly, given that this is a kind of Muslim audience, we've seen a lot of founders, and the thing that, as Ibrahim said, you kind of have to go in expecting that you're going to fail with a venture investment. The thing that always sticks for me isn't really actually success or failure. It's the character of the founder. And, there's been companies that failed, and I think the founder could have behaved better. There's companies that failed, and I think the founder was, I think they felt it as much as we, or more than we did. Actually, of course, a founder should feel failure more than an investor does. And then similarly, even on the success side, there's been successful founders who, I couldn't really care less about them because of the way that they conducted themselves. And then there's been successful founders who, I'm really proud and pleased for them. And I think that, the thing, a lot of business you can't control, but the things that you can control, especially when you have got shareholder money, that is a responsibility on you. I just think that it's the right thing to do. And yeah, we've seen far too many people that don't behave like that, unfortunately.
Is the fund basically any geographical location investment point of view, or all over?
Yeah, we've got a few pockets that so for venture in particular, a lot of our investments have been in the UK because of a specific tax break that there is. But we've done a bunch globally as well. So we're pretty used to investing globally. Yeah. Yes. No.
First of all, thank you so much, guys, for coming.
No.
My question is, as a fund, how urgent do you feel you have to deploy capital? And if yes, if it's urgent, how do you balance between the due diligence of the companies you want to invest and the people that gave you money?
Yeah, I think with fixed income, the income side, which is about half of the entire portfolio these days, that's actually probably where it's the most urgent, because once an investor has given us money, the clock is already ticking. Their earnings have already started, and so it's actually a pretty big operation on our end to make sure that we have. It's a nice problem to have, but our big problem is finding places that we can 50 million, and they're able to take that money from us on time every time, because that lag is an absolute killer. Like if you think about, you're trying to return, let's say, 8% or 9% per annum to an investor. That's 4.5% every 6 months, and 2.25% every 3 months. And you can see that, even if you miss a few weeks, that knocks off a percentage point, which is actually quite significant. Because if you're taking a 2% management fee and you're having to take that haircut, you've kind of lost half of your revenue by just faffing around and doing legals and what have you. So it's a really pertinent question, and the way we deal with that is by having long-term relationships with companies that can take that money from us in a scalable way, and just being really kind of ahead of time in terms of, like, if we are raising, we already know that Offer, which is a home finance company, will need an injection in September, or Stride, which is another home finance company, has this ramp up time that they're going through, or Ayan Capital have a kind of cyclical model where it kind of quietens down over the summer, but in the latter half of the year they're going to need more capital. So I think that's one way to deal with it. When it comes to venture and private equity, things are a little bit more relaxed. Not so relaxed, but because you're dealing with much more longer time horizons, 5 to 7, 8 years, that initial 1 month drag doesn't really make too much of a difference, and the big return is actually getting the decision right. So private credit very much feel the burn. On the other stuff, it's not as bad.
Yeah, question for both of you, but maybe Brother Marcin, since he jumped straight out into the sort of startup world. You said having a family and children sort of motivated that. That sounds like the opposite of what I would expect. That sounds like, hey, maybe I should just settle down, make some money, and keep the safe, easy, cushy job. What was that thought process, and what were sort of the parameters that you needed, the check boxes that you need to tick? Also, if you can repeat the questions for people watching the stream.
Okay, yeah. So the question is around, having family actually being a motivating factor rather than a drag. It was actually the same for both of us. We were actually at very, very similar stages in life, and I know that having a family and being a founder are, especially in this part of the world, and go to Silicon Valley or whatever, kind of antithetical. And I think that we, especially as Muslims, need to understand that there is societal trend, right, towards not having getting married later, not having children, so on and so forth. So it's inevitable that the mainstream voice says, don't get married, don't have children, focus on your company, da 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 da. So that's the first thing, that backdrop is kind of out there. I think from my point of view, I was always kind of just as from a personal philosophy point of view, keen to just, get married and start having children. Obviously, it's a good thing to do. But I do remember, I really vividly remember that when I had my first, it wasn't when I got married, but it was when I had my first child. I don't know, maybe it's like a primal instinctual thing, but like something happened. And I don't know, I just felt more focused, more invigorated. I think that, a lot of stuff just clarified in my head. And I was talking to other people who have said similar things. And it's not necessarily just founders, it's also people that are in, standard jobs and stuff like that, where suddenly they feel, as I said, it must be some kind of primal instinct, right? Like the provider kind of instinct. So yeah, and I think that the other thing is that when you go through this kind of long, arduous journey of founding a company, you can realistically spend your entire days and nights working on the company. And even now, like some days I'll be at the office or whatever, and yeah, like I say, I could just carry on working into the night, but then like one of my kids will call and be like, "Are you going to come home?" And then you weigh it up and you're like, okay, look, I could spend 4 hours more here, and I'll probably get A, B, C, D done. But is the world going to end if I don't do A, B, C, and D? Like, probably not. Let's wake up like 2 hours earlier tomorrow and do it then. And so you start making these choices, and that's really helpful and healthy, actually, right? Because we need to make sure that our brains are performing, that our hearts are in the right place, etc. So I don't know how it's been for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a poem by Imam Shafi'i that comes to mind. He says, "توكلت في رزقي على الله خالقي وأيقنت أن الله لا شك رازقي وما يكن من رزق فليس يفوتني ولو كان في قاع البحار العوامق سيأتي به الله العظيم بفضل ربه ولو لم يكن مني لسان بناطقي في شيء في أي شيء تذهب حسرة وقد قسم الرحمن رزق الخلائق." I won't translate all of that. I've actually translated the Diwan of Imam Shafi'i, which you can Google and you can find it. But he's basically saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken on that responsibility of feeding you and looking after you. And even if that risk is there at the bottom of the ocean, it will come to you. So if we truly believe in that, then we should just trust. And we are living in the most prosperous countries in the world. The safety net is incredible that we have. So yeah, we don't really have anything to worry about.
First of all, amazing work, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in your efforts.
I mean, yeah.
I'm really interested in the million component. To me, the hardest part is that first million. What are some things that you did that worked? You're like, I wish I hit this right away. And then what are some things that maybe you spent a lot of time in and didn't provide you that fruit? And then how do you balance raising money but not giving up too much equity? Is there a percentage in your mind where you're like, I'm not going to give past this amount? Those are three questions I have.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is around fundraising and what really worked. We're talking about the first million being the hardest, and then the second part of the question was how much equity should you give away and what's appropriate there. So without repeating what we talked about a bit earlier, I'd say the one other thing that's helpful when it comes to fundraising is listening to the feedback of the market, which is that if you talk to 20 VCs or 20 angel investors, and the common feedback that is coming back is X thing. This is broken, this is nice, but this is broken, it doesn't really make sense. It's really it's actually useful for you as a business or you as a person or as a startup to take that on board. Sometimes, very rarely, they may all be wrong, right? But actually, a lot of the time, then they're not wrong. If everyone is kind of saying the same thing, you're probably better off taking a step back and spending 3 to 6 months fixing that, and then going back, because startups are like a science experiment. You have a hypothesis that this is a great startup, it should raise money, test it in the market. The market says no, go back. Okay, so you go back and you listen, you tweak it, and then you go again, and then you see what happens. Now, in terms of the amount of equity to give away, I would approach it firstly from a perspective of what's the market. So usually you would expect to dilute at the angel stage, probably somewhere between 2 and I'd say 6% if it's a smallish angel round. And then at pre-seed or seed, where you kind of get raising a slightly larger round, let's say that first million, you would be expecting to dilute somewhere, if it's an incredibly strong round, like 12%, or if it's an average round, somewhere between 20 and 25%. And probably the next stage is Series A. You're probably looking at, again, that same range again, once more. And this is the point where you possibly might end up losing the majority equity control, although you probably still have majority share board control. And then after that, you're probably going to end up losing equity. And then you need to think about if you want to lose majority board control or not. And then it kind of goes on from there. So that's the first side, look at the market. The second side would be to be informed by the specific dynamic of your fundraise. If the first fundraise we did was like pulling teeth. It was very difficult. and we got ultimately we did get a valuation that we were happy with, but it perhaps wasn't as easy. The second time round, it's just like markets are weird. Second time round, we didn't even need to go to the market. We just raised internally. We went to them and we said, look, we want to raise, and they just money seemed to flood in, and we were done within like a week. And that's not something amazing that we've done. It's just sometimes markets are markets, and so you have to be informed by that as well. And if you're lucky, cash in, and if you're not lucky, then just grit your teeth and just work hard.
Question. I have Cambridge O levels, and I'm wondering about the difference between Oxford and Cambridge. And when you're applying, why did you end up in one, not the other?
So
You have to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the question is around applying between Oxford and Cambridge. I have a whole story about this, which I won't get into. But my decision to apply to Oxford was pretty last minute, and so honestly, my decision was I went onto a computer in the center at school, because the deadline was approaching fast, and I typed in Oxford, and I typed in Cambridge, and then Cambridge seemed to have these like slightly extra things that you have to do. I think it's similar in the US. You do all these like other random modules. Yeah, you have to do like these other modules and stuff when you do a degree, right? Like you do like a semester doing some. Am I right? Is this like you do like you don't just study one thing. You have to do
general education.
You have to do some other things when you're doing a degree, right? Like you have to do some other classes. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So then I was like, I'll just go for Oxford then. So yeah, maybe for him.
I mean, it was mine was equally stupid, to be honest, which was there was a gifted and talented cohort in the school that was applying for Oxbridge, and I was a contrarian, and they were all applying to Cambridge. So I thought, you know what, let me apply to Oxford. Pretty much it.
Yeah, it was a good decision though.
Any plans to open up your funds to non-accredited investors in the US?
Yes, is the simple answer. So we've got some new regulatory permissions in the UK, which came through this week, and so savings accounts and pensions are very much on the radar. And I think the savings accounts, the FDIC approved and FSCS protected products, we want to offer them, and we can actually offer them globally. So that's something that hopefully we launch in the next 3 to 6 months. And then more broadly for the US, we're still figuring it out, but there's some exciting stuff that's on the radar. And yeah, watch this space.
Would that be the private equity and venture capital stuff?
It will be like you'll be able to offer access that and more.
So for the fourth or fifth time, thank you so much for coming. I read the email newsletter that got sent like every 2 weeks. I read it all the way through. It's very good. So I'm a college student, and I did a 3-month internship, and I'm already disillusioned with like normal work. So I was thinking of working or like trying to found a startup over the summer, just kind of experimenting. Do you recommend bootstrapping and moving slower, or trying to seek like venture capital and then perhaps moving faster? Like, what do you recommend?
So maybe if I repeat the question, you're a college student. You tried a 3-month internship and didn't like it, understandably, and you are looking to potentially start up your own thing, and you're thinking, should I bootstrap or should I fundraise for it? I think my thought on this is that it's like horses for courses, really. Mindset I think very much should be to bootstrap. That is, I think, the if all else if nothing else is pushing you towards fundraising, just bootstrap, because fundraising in and of itself is a terrible thing. You're selling the equity of your business, which is the most valuable thing. Why would you do that? Don't do it. But you would do that if you think that the capital will allow you to create a lot of value really quickly, and it's vital for you as a business to do that, either because you're in a business that requires a lot of investment to create the secret potion, or because you're in a business that is a winner takes all market and you need to just raise the money to just go and take the entire market, right? So those would be two reasons why you would probably want to raise. Yeah, I'd say start with bootstrap, and then it will be very quickly clear to you if you need to fundraise, and then kind of reluctantly and kind of you're forced into it. You kind of go down the fundraise route, but don't do it because it's sexy. That's not a good reason.
Can I just follow up on that real quick? In light of the fact that like you can really accelerate your output using AI, should you start as a solo founder and then maybe if you kind of feel like you need a co-founder, then go look for one, or should you start out by looking for a co-founder?
I think so. The question is solo founder versus getting a co-founder. I was going to add on to the last bit of Ibrahim's answer, which you kind of mentioned in your question around AI. I think that there hasn't been a better time to bootstrap, right? Because of how much output you can get with AI. I think the co-founder versus solo question kind of depends, I think, on your own skill set, temperament. I think it's more a question of you as an individual. I think that, and it depends on the type of company as well. So I think if it's like one of those companies where you just need to be heads down, build, ship, market, distribute, all, and you're confident doing it all yourself, sure. If you think that you're definitely someone that needs someone else to kind of sound ideas off, or there's like a specific weakness that that you have that this other person would then fill, then sure, do that. But I think nowadays the trend seems to be solo, bootstrap, and yeah.
I was just reading, as I mentioned to you, about the philosophy you have that how we can conquer or help the Muslim Ummah in poverty, in general poverty, which is actually mental poverty more than financial poverty. And in spite of having all the resources in the world, all our politicians and the government and the backers all over the world and backing money from all of them. So it is very noble cause. I just want to hear from you.
Yeah.
That what is your vision? How you are inspired by this concept? What are your goals in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, really appreciate you raising that about the mission and the vision, because I think we should have mentioned that, and we've kind of neglected it in this conversation. For me, it's about, this is the reason why we do what we do, and you're exactly right that we as a community are extremely weak, and the events over the last 2-3 years have really starkly shown us how weak we are. And in order for us to change that, we need to change things politically, we need to change things economically, we need to change things culturally, and in terms of our brand perception, we need to change things spiritually as well. All four of those things come together. And for us, we really focus on the economic bit because there's very strong tangents between that and politics and the culture bit. And if I put it in one single line, it's we need to start watering different fields. If we expect the world to look different to what it is today, then we need to start putting our money into different places. Because if we all reflect, where is our money sat right now? It's either sat in bank accounts or it's sat in US stock markets, primarily tech stocks. And now if you take a step back and you think, hang on a second, who controls this place? It's tech companies in the banking and financing sector, right? It's like, oh, right, well, maybe we should do something different then. And for us, what we're trying to do with on the private credit side, Sharia compliant private credit and private equity side, is precisely trying to address exactly that, which is, okay, well, if you don't put your money into banks and banks provide all of the financing, then you need to have an alternative to that function. And that's what we as a community can provide through these income funds, where rather than your money leaking out and your money being used to serve all sorts of other things, including nefarious purposes, why not take this lady's money and sluice it back into that entrepreneur's startup, or that entrepreneur's company that needs asset financing, and then that money circulates back around. So if we are going to create that stronger, more prosperous ummah, we actually have the money. The problem is that money goes elsewhere. And so our job, I see at Curate Capital, is to create that pipe work that allows you all and us to water different fields and make that scalable and build those pipes and make them as large as possible and make sure that we're picking the right fields. That's kind of how I think about it.
Well, if you were going to finish.
Anything to add?
Nothing to it.
Yeah, I think one more follow-up.
Sure. Along that line a little bit, one of the things you mentioned on the private side, one of the challenges we faced from a U.S. perspective is finding finances Sharia compliant for business that's not specifically tied to real estate. Find acquisition, so we want to acquire, but we're not necessarily acquiring from an equity position. We're looking for debt financing, but Sharia compliant debt financing. Is that something you're currently doing, or how does it work in the UK? Why don't we see that as much here in the US, considering what you just mentioned?
Yeah,
it's regulatory now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point, and so this is exactly the sort of thing. Maybe we can pick up on this offline.
Because that's, if you think about it, there's from other business owners and speaking to them, part of the hesitation to further growth is that may have a halal compliant company, but to grow it, if you're not going out finding equity,
exactly,
there's no compliant
debt
finance, compliant debt finance.
Absolutely. I mean that's the big issue, right? And then if you take that even further, public equities, we have this halal, 30% debt to market cap ratio. That is, of course, it's fine. AIFE signed off on it, and I invest and use that as well. But it's a compromised position, and we should have a vision on having 100 stocks that are fully Sharia compliant. The only way you do that is you have scaled up businesses that are large enough to list, your business large enough now to list, and the only way that happens is you have Sharia compliant debt funding, right? So it kind of all comes back to the debt funding.
With that too, one of the challenges is the opaqueness in finance itself. Where those dollars, just as you mentioned, where did those other dollars come from? They can sound Sharia compliant, it can sound like, but the group of investors who are behind it could come from a number of different.
Yeah,
that's also a challenge.
That's true. That's very true. I'll give you our journey, and we've kind of just stumbled into it in a way. 3.5 years ago in the UK, we had essentially one Islamic home finance provider, and it's quite expensive. And so we thought, all right, let's just try and create more Islamic home finance, because we think that's going to create competition and that's going to drive prices down. And so our GBP income fund set off on that journey. And we didn't really know what we were doing, if I'm perfectly honest. We didn't know as much about the industry as we do now. And in that time, what we have done is we have become part of a sukuk issuance. That was the £300 million sukuk issuance last year. And now the flywheel is turning, and we're now involved in 3 other sukuk issuances, all of that scale. So this year we're kind of on a runway where this this 50 million, 100 million fund is now seeding what ultimately will be £1 billion or $1 billion sukuk issuance, and that's all possible within finance. And so coming back to how we do this for SMEs, so we are already doing in the home finance space. We're already doing it for SMEs in the Middle East. So there's a company called Irad that we backed. We put in about 5 to 7 million so far. They've now raised another 100 million funding line, and that accelerates them further. They've got some Saudi sovereign investment as well, so we see ourselves as that first kind of riskier bit of debt capital that comes in and sees something that's slightly hairy, but not actually that hairy once you kind of dig into it, and then facilitates that for the community so that it's now really scaling and whirring away. So in the US, for example, there are companies out, it's probably not appropriate to name them, but there are companies where I can see that there's some early signs that this is a funding house that will provide funding to SMEs, for example, or this is a funding house that will provide funding for car finance. These are companies we've come across, and other types of financing that is needed. And because we've now built that skill set where we understand how securitization works, how first loss, mezzanine finance, how Sharia compliant senior equity, senior debt can come in, we can actually help fund a lot of that and structure a lot of that. And that then is a major unlock for the community. And all it's going to take, I think, is us being involved in this market for about 2 to 3 years, because that's kind of the time cycle that it's taken. So I'm actually really optimistic that I think in the next 3 to 6 years we're really kind of picking up steam, and inshallah we can get somewhere.
Related to that, because we had Safir Mohideen come in, and he's also involved along with some of his family and others in Souk Capital. I don't know if we talked about that while he was here, because I wasn't able to be right. So,
No.
yeah, but so Souk, what they do is they do inventory financing, because that might be relevant to some of these businesses, right? So if you already have, kind of a unit of success, and the only thing holding you back is literally that, like, you need to fund your inventory, they would come in and fund that. So that's
Exactly.
one of the options.
Exactly. And we would be the kind of people who would back Souk Capital and, hopefully take it to the next level.
Inventory financing or
Inventory financing. So meaning that, but just one thing before you mentioned Sukuk a lot, but I don't know if everybody understands it. It would be good to just explain.
Sharia compliant version of bonds. So like a steady return that comes from some kind of either leasing, rental income coming in. Typically, that's what it is.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much.
No, barakallahu feek. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
No, it's a pleasure.
This was really good. And thank you.
Anyone not on the WhatsApp group, you can come see me and you can scan the QR code and you can follow.
You guys have a Medina Labs in the UK?
We variants
Connect
of it.
us to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lean developers.
Give me the
give
list
you
of
this.
names. I'd be
Yes.
curious to just learn from them because we're new here.
This is for you.
And Muslim Tech Fest, of course, you've probably heard of those guys.
I've heard of them.
This is for you.
Oh,
Yes.
fantastic! Is this one of those 2 weeks ones?
I think so. Leader, I don't know about that. That's Oh yeah.
Let me do this one thing.